Hi everybody, this is MaDonna from Mad Bees. How are you today? It's a great day here. It's rainy, so if you're enjoying the rain, it's a good day to come inside and sew. So today I want to talk about cutting. Last week we talked a little bit about fabric grain, and today we're going to move into cutting. So I want you to take a look at the tools that you have. And I'm going to show you how to change a blade on the rotary cutter and talk a little bit about rulers and cutting mats. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the rulers and cutting mats. Rulers are wonderful. They come in lots of different sizes and shapes, and they have gotten and improved tons in the past few years. So the first one that I'm going to show you is one that's made by Nifty Notions, and at the time it was probably the leader in cutting mats. It has multiple size lines on it. It also has the 1/8 inch measurements. The only thing that I don't care for about this one is it doesn't actually give me a tight crosshair at that intersection line. I like to see exactly where that intersection is. This one does not have a non-slip back on it, which is a newer concept, and that is a really nice feature to have. I always have in my arsenal of rulers, I do have the 6x24 is one of the top sizes that I use. So that is one that I always want because it is easy to convert into most every pattern. I am not a huge fan of 1/2 inch measurement rulers. Those I can use when I'm doing smaller things, but I get mixed up with this 1/2 inch added onto my larger sizes. So I stick with the 6x24 instead of the 6.5x24. Okay, so that's the first thing on the first ruler. Newer rulers are ones that are made by a company called Quilter Select. And they're a great ruler because they do have 1/8 inch measurements. They also have my angle lines of 45, 60, 30, and they go in both directions from the left to the right. And so do all the measurements on the ruler go from the left to the right. So up at the top here, if I'm left-handed, I can read it in one direction. If I'm right-handed, I read it in the other direction. I don't know how many of you have done this a million times because you don't have it the right way on the table. This way it makes it super easy to be able to tell which way. The other thing that it has on it is it has a coating on the back of it. And that coating prevents your ruler from slipping on your fabric. And really, truly, when it's on the fabric, it goes nowhere. I mean, I'm moving the whole piece of fabric along with it. This here is a 12x6 ruler. I like that. The other thing that's out there, and I should hit on this real quick, is there is a new product on the market, and it is called Grippy Spray. And it can be sprayed on the back side of rulers that are not already having this coating on them. It's excellent because it'll just put some traction on the back. It can be put on and removed. This cannot be removed off the back. So it can be put on them, use it on that triangle shape. If you want to use that triangle shape for something else, I'm not sure what, you can actually just use a little bit of, they have an actual cleanser, but any type of an oil will remove that. If the corners of that wear out, like you've been using it a lot and they wear out on you, you can just respray them, which is really easy. If you're going to use it on your long arm rulers, you can actually put a second coat on there so that that keeps them from sliding also. These have it already on there. We use these on the floor all the time. At this point in time, I've only changed the rulers about once a year, and we are cutting way more than any of you will be cutting in your household. So they really do last. Even if it wears off on these outside edges, because that's where we're grabbing it most of the time, there's still plenty down the center of it to work. So favorite size, 6x24, 6x12, and then my absolute is a 3x18. This is a Quilter Select 3x18 inch ruler. And the reason I really like that one is I would say every quilt almost has something that's 2.5 inches wide. So I'm able to lay this on my fabric and be able to get that 2.5 inches covering up the whole piece. I don't want to use a 2.5 inch wide. I like the 3 inch because in that way I can line it up on the table. I can line it up on my fabric. I like the 18 inch because it's the same width as my fat quarter. So I can use it on that without having to have the 6x24, which sometimes is hanging off the edge of the table. So that is the ruler that's probably the number one that I use once I've gotten it cut down to where I need. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about rotary cutters. So rotary cutters are a tool that you need to use, and remember, they're kind of like a sewing machine needle. We all put off changing the blade or the needle until we absolutely have to, and we shouldn't. A lot of times when we're putting off that blade, we start winding up where we're chewing up our fabric, and that's not good for our cutting mat, it's not good for our fabric, and it gets us frustrated. So think about it, that maybe the first of every month you put a new blade in. That's 12 blades a year. When you look at the hobby that we're in, that's not that big of an expense. That way you remember to do it, and you've got it under control, and you're able to keep up with that. So I have two different cutters in front of me. These are two of the very popular ones that we carry in the store, and they're popular for different reasons. This one here on the right is an Olfa Cutter. It's a 45 millimeter blade on it. It comes in 2 or 3 sizes. We've got, I think, 3 sizes out on the floor for purchase. It's really nice because when you open and close it, it automatically at least shuts so that you won't accidentally cut yourself on it. You can lock it in the open position, which I would never recommend, or you can lock it in the closed position and then it won't open for you, okay? On the back side of this, it has the pieces that we need to be able to change the blade. So I'm going to pretend like I'm changing the blade. I'm going to undo the screw on here, and I actually hold the little disc on the front with my finger, and then I unscrew. I take the screw off and I set it down on the table. I have a metal washer here, and the easiest way for me to remember, maybe not you, for me to remember which way it goes on is it's a U. If you look at it right now, it's shaped like a U, and you are changing it, so you need to be able to see it as a U. Okay, easy enough. Take that off. There's now a plastic disc on there. That comes off. Once I've done those 3 pieces, I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. Oh, look at that nice goober in there. That would be jamming up my blade. So that's a big piece of lint in there. Okay, I'm going to clean off all the area, and I'm going to put a new blade on. They just slide on and off. Easy enough. When you go to put it back on, if you want to use a rotary blade that is a zigzag blade, you know how they have the pinking shear type one, you need this plastic disc. This plastic disc goes right on top of this, then it goes into there, and what that does is it moves the blade further away from the rotary cutter. So the zigzag blade will fit on there, the pinking shear type of blade. So if you ever want to do something where you're leaving a little bit of a pinked edge on it, that's what you want to do with that little disc. That now comes on all the new rotary cutters. They found it was easier and less expensive for them as a company to just put that disc on all of them versus selling another cutter. So you can buy any blade, you have to make sure you have the disc, and then you're able to do that. So I'm going to take that little disc off. When we're not using it for the pinking, it goes on the other side. I'm going to set this back and on. I'm going to put my disc on. I want to make sure my washer is making a U shape because you are changing it. It kind of sits in there. It's got a little flat side on it and a round side. Here, I'll take it off a second so you can see better. It has 2 flat sides on that and 2 rounded sides. That fits onto the little holder, the little screw thing has 2 flat sides and 2 rounded sides. So it just fits right in there. Okay, it hooks in there. And then our screw actually has 2 ways it can go on. And you'll try it. One way it won't go on, the other way it'll go on, and it sits almost to the point of being flat on there. If it's not being flat, it's on upside down. You do not really want to over screw this because you want your blade to be able to move. We're going to squeeze the handle then, and we're ready to go. Okay, that's the Olfa cutter. When you use the Olfa also, it has finger grips on the top. It's designed for you to put your finger on the top and go. That's how this one's different. So when I'm looking at my arm, it's not quite as ergonomic as when we use the next one. So that's the Olfa Cutter. This one here is the Quilter Select Cutter. So this is made by Quilter Select. That is the rulers that we use. This one is very different. It has the weight of more like a hammer. It is balanced in your hand so that it feels like a tool instead of plasticky. I mean, it's got some definite weight behind it. It is opened like this. It's different. You have a little push button on here. You're going to push the button and set it down, and it's open. Take your finger off the button, and you're ready to go. You're going to hold it just like you would a hammer, and then you cut. To close it, all you have to do is rotate it back on its other side, tap it, and it's closed. Push, open, remove your finger, you're good to go. Tap, and you're closed. I'm cutting polar fleece. I want it to have more blade. I really, I wish I would have gotten that 60 instead of this 45. I can make this a thicker blade. Push down, remove your finger, your thumb, rotate it, and now I can get a bigger blade width. I can get a really big blade if I want. When I heard that, when I was working that and I opened it up all this way, it actually makes a little click noise, which means it won't close on its own now. Okay, so then I have to push the button to set it down to be able to get it into the closed position. So push, open, bigger. If you kind of listen, it clicked. When I want to close it now, I need to push on that button and just set it down and get it into its position, and it clicked back close. To change the blade on this one, it's a pull back, pick up, change the blade, put it back on. It actually has two little magnets in there. Push this back onto the top here. Come on there. It's got a flat side on it, so it's got to go a certain way, but it's easy enough to get it in there. You know, when you're on TV, it's always harder to do. And then you just slide that pin back in and you're ready to go. If you're a lefty, this is super easy because you put it in your left hand, you push the button, you set it down, you open it up as big as you want it, you click it closed. So for those of us who can use both hands, this is really easy to do. Okay, next tool is your cutting mat. So this one is actually a Quilter Select cutting mat. I like it. I like the Olfa mats, okay? I'm not going to say one's better than the other because they're just different than each other. This one here has the 1/8 inch measurements on it. It has lines going from 1 all the way up to 18, and then it comes back down the other way. So left-handed or right-handed, you're able to do it. It has those same lines going backwards and forwards on the other sides. 1 up to 24 and back down again. It has all of your angles on it from 2 different directions. So really, really nice. And it's got, like I said before, it also has the 1/8 inch measurements, which I'm finding more and more that I'm using an 1/8 inch because skills are getting better and you're starting to do harder programs. On the back side of this, I have a dark side. And the dark side is nice when you're working on very light fabrics. You can see them, you have a better contrast. When you're working on something that's matchy-matchy to this, it's not always as easy to be able to have the contrast. So I do like that. Now, I hear a lot of people who say, my blade isn't working anymore. I keep getting skips in it. So one of the reasons that you're going to get skips in it is because your mat has skips in it. So we have a tendency to cut along the 9, the 12, the 18. Those are common measurements for us to cut. So after we've cut a long time on this, even an Olfa self-healing, I'm not sure where they're self-healing from, it's going to get a groove in it. And if you try to cut something going against that groove, when it falls into that little line there, it's going to skip. It's going to miss that spot because the fibers are sitting down too low. So you have to be careful about if you're using your mat over and over again, you may need to move over. And if you've ever been on the floor here, on the cutting floor, after our mats are out there for a while, we take and we mark off number 1 and number 2, and we start at number 1 here so that now we're at 20, you know, when we cut our half-yard cuts, because that's the most consistent in the store is a half-yard. And after a while, we can't go through that anymore. It just has worn out the mats too much. The mats, actually, we've had a tendency to cut right through them. So you do have to just think about that a little bit when you're cutting. So I think I've gone over tools a little bit today. So then I want to talk about cutting. So we're going to be cutting from the Alex Anderson book. I've decided that I'm going to do the quilt along, or this, whatever you want to call this, the Monday thing with MaDonna. We're going to be doing this sampler quilt. And in this sampler quilt, it gives actual cutting instructions on the first page. So it told us what yardage we needed, how many different color groups we needed, and we're good with that. We are not at this point in time going to cut our borders at all. So there's an inner border and an outer border and binding on this. Leave those fabrics alone. So I know exactly what those two fabrics are for mine. I set them aside. I'm going to turn to the first page, and today while I'm with you, I am going to cut a couple pieces for the rail fence block. So it tells me I need one strip 2.5 inches by 42, which is width of fabric. So sometimes it'll say 2.5 WOF, which means width of fabric. The length would be this. The width would be this. So the width means from selvage to selvage, okay, from the end to the end of 3 different greens. Now they're doing their quilt over here with green, red, blue, and that kind of thing. You need to decide what you want to do your fabrics with. I am pretty sure that I am not going to follow just 3 greens. I've already picked out my fabrics. I'm going to follow their rules a little bit, but I'm also going to break their rules because I like higher contrast. So that's my own tidbit. So, but right now I'm going to cut from right here. I'm going to cut a strip 2.5 by 42 so that I can show you how I cut. Okay, so Deanna, we're going to back up just a hair there. And anytime I cut, you good? Yeah. Okay. Anytime I cut, I stand and cut. So I did a retreat this weekend and was trying to be a cheater and helping somebody out. I sat down, and I was sitting down when she asked the question. And so I just grabbed my ruler and I cut along it. And I actually cut a little nudge into my ruler. Okay. And it's nothing. I mean, I have to feel it to find it. I can't really see it, but now I can actually put my finger on there and I know exactly where it's at. So every time I cut now along that edge there, I'm not going to be precise. So standing up is going to help tremendously. If you need to sit and cut, try to sit where your table can be lower than where you are. You're going to get better pressure on your fabric. So right now, if I sit here and cut, I have to raise up my shoulder, raise up my arm, and push. I can't be accurate. I've already changed so many of the variables. So when I cut, I typically try to stand up. I always line up my hip to the outside edge where I'm cutting. So for those of you that are left-handed, which I can cut both left and right-handed, it depends on where I'm at and what I'm working on. I will cut with this hip, and then I'll move over and cut with this hip. So I'm very fortunate when you got to go around a square, I don't have to switch anything, okay? I have to just rotate my hand in my cutter. So that's kind of nice. But you just need to be aware. So the reason that we're doing that is our hip is, if we think about this, we're cutting a straight line. When we walk with a straight line and our arms stay here. If when we walked the whole time we walked like this, which is what you're doing with this line, when you're lining up your nose to that, you're going to be pushing your ruler. You're going to be pushing, you're going to be pushing. If I stand up and I cut, and I have my body right here, and I cut, look at how nice and straight of a line I can do. I also don't have to use nearly as much force holding down the cutter or holding down my ruler, because it's not going to be pushing into the ruler. So I'm going to grab a ruler. I need a 6 by 24. I think there's one in Kate's table.
Okay.
Sorry guys, I'll be right back.
I'll make it from behind you, or just like this?
Yeah, why don't you come from behind? Like right here.
Okay.
Okay, so the other thing I want you to see real quick is this ruler has been used a ton on the floor, and now we've moved it to the back because customers, when they see that, are like, oh, but it's missing all of that bottom line. This ruler, even with all of that missing, is not going to move. Okay, so last week I showed you how to square up your fabric. I actually tore a line on there so you could see that. I've got a nice piece of fabric here, and on these instructions here, it tells me I need one strip of fabric, 2.5 by 42. So I'm going to put my ruler onto my fabric. I am using my ruler as my measurements, not the ruler on the mat. I use the ruler on the mat to make sure I'm straight. I want to kind of watch where I'm sitting. Can you see enough contrast in that, Deanna? Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, I'll flip it to the other side. Okay, so I've got my fabric lined up on my line. I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to put it down on top of it. And when I put this on top, I start right at the very top there, and I look and I lay. So I start at the very top there. I look and I lay. And I keep watching it as it's going down so that I stay straight. So look at how nice and straight that is all the way down. I first use my mat line to get it straight, then I put my ruler on top of it. I then am going to place my hand on the ruler, and I put it right at about mid-level, and you can see I'm way over here. I am not on top of it in the center here blocking it. I'm here, I set down, and I start back behind. I don't start trying to cut right there, right where the fabric is. I'm going to start back here at the very end of the mat. That way I've got momentum going, and it's going to cut much more evenly through it. Hold my ruler, set down my cutter, it pops open, I start back and I go. And I move my hand and I go. And I move my hand and I go. I protect what's underneath my ruler. I've got my hand on there holding it still. I'm going to make sure that this all cut, and then I'm going to move on. Okay, if I let go and I miss pieces, now all of that has to be realigned again. Because there's so many times where I see people where they've got all these chew marks, and a lot of that is that they did not get going. I cut very slow so you could see it this time. The majority of the time, I'm going to set this on here. I'm going to line up at the top just like I showed you. I'm not in love with this little wrinkle right there. Fix that wrinkle. Okay, so I'm going to line up at the top right on my 2.5. I'm going to walk it down all the fabric. Make sure that it maintained nice and straight all the way down. Get rid of that little wrinkle up there. I guess I should have pressed that a little. Okay, and then this is how fast I'm going to cut. I set my rotary cutter down. The speed that I have is going to help me get through it. When you go too slow, it has a tendency to drag on you. And a lot of people, when they go too slow, want to pull the rotary cutter back again at them to be able to get going again. Always go away from yourself. Typically, there's nobody up here that you're going to cut. Back here, you've got fingers and body. I hold on to my ruler, I pull away my piece to make sure it's good. I close my cutter and I set it aside. Okay, in this now, it says from our fabrics, we need to cut from the 3 greens. We're going to measure rectangles 2.5 by 6.5. So remember, I have this great ruler here. It's my 3 by 18. I'm going to move this out of the way. When I cut fabric, I am not a person who feels comfortable cutting tons of layers. I will cut 2 layers. I will cut 4 layers if it's something that I know is going to be cleaned up later on. When you cut 2 layers of something, okay, so I'm going to leave this folded. I'm going to first cut off my selvage. Let me get these out of the way. This is now garbage. I'm going to turn this the opposite direction on my mat because I really always want to try to cut in one direction across my mat, like I said before. I'm going to line up my ruler on the edge here, and I'm going to clean this up. Remember, I told you your selvage is straight, so I use my selvage as a guide. I'm just going to cut off this junk piece. Now, I've got to cut a piece 6.5. Guess what? I can lay my ruler on here this way, measure to my 6.5, I can make sure that bottom edge is nice and straight and cut. That way I'm not manipulating that big, huge ruler, and I can see everything. I have control of all of that. I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Okay, and there we go. One really nice piece. I'm going to grab a piece of junk fabric I have over here because I want to show you something. Show you all something. Whoever's watching me today. Okay, I've got a piece of fabric here, just a piece of fabric. It doesn't really matter. I have 2 layers here, and then I've got 2 more pieces here. So I'm now 4 thick. And I'm going to cut it, okay? And I can cut it this way. I can cut it this way, okay? If you have a long ruler and you want to cut it this way. This is what I want you to see, okay? I'm nice and straight there. I'm nice and straight there. I look great there. When I put this on here, and even with me starting back here, you can watch this fabric start to move forward. So it pushes itself. So it's going to always wind up just a little longer in that corner. So when you're doing something like this where you don't want it to shift at all, you need to put your fingers on either side of this to really put force on it so that end doesn't get longer. So now when you watch me do this, you can see it still moves a little bit, but it doesn't seem to stretch it as much. That's why I really only like 2 layers, because I don't get that movement and that craziness. So, are you done? I'm done. That's a lot that you've learned today, a real lot. So this is today's lesson. What I would love you to do is get some cutting done. Work on your cutting skills. Work on looking at those measurements once, twice, a third time. Think about the tools that you're using. If you remember the 1st of every month to put a new blade in your cutter, you're going to be so much happier. And why do we put it off? I don't know. But that's what we're going to do is I would like you to cut. Next week, Monday, I will not be here. So we're going to skip a week. Well, unless I get excited and I come up with something to talk about Monday. I'm going to be in Colorado. So so I will try to see if there's something there. I may take a tour of a quilt shop or something. So otherwise, we'll be back in 2 weeks. That gives you plenty of time to cut. Cut, 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 cut. If you get stuck at something, send us a Facebook question. We'll try to get an answer to you as quick as we can. Everybody have a great day. Enjoy the rain because tomorrow will be sunshine, I hope. Bye now.